Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. There was much political activity in the past few days, starting with the Berlin Green Week exhibition, where Agriculture Commissioner Phil Hogan organised a debate on the future of rural development programmes. Irish Country Living consumer editor Ciara Leahy was there, and she asked Commissioner Hogan what progress was made since last year's Cork Declaration on Rural Development.
Seriously, on an agricultural and rural development policy, we thought it was a good opportunity to go back to Cork last September to refresh our rural development policies over the last 20 years. Cork 1 was a long time ago, 20 years, a lot has changed. So what we're doing now is updating our rural development policy to see what more it can do, and of course we have to make it do more to ensure that we have more vibrancy and a critical mass of services for the benefit of our rural dwellers. And already we are making some progress on the connectivity agenda arising from Cork, where everybody realises that broadband is critical towards job creation, towards quality of life, and the theme of Cork was, of course, or the theme of the document arising from Cork was a better life in rural areas. So right across the spectrum of policies, the 10-point plan that was agreed in Cork, we are now coming forward today, not just on reflections, but actions about how we can implement it. So we are today clearly indicating the roadmap for agriculture policy, where we're starting the consultation for the next CAP reform on the 2nd of February, with a view to having a communication that will set out our policy perspective by the end of the year. Secondly, we are working on water policy with Commissioner for the Environment, Mr. Vella, to see what quality and quantities of water are needed for food industry, for our farmers, in order to generate more vitality in our rural areas. And this is a big issue right around the European Union. We are working with the impressive list that has been provided from the European Network for Rural Development to implement the Cork Declaration. We're also looking at issues that emerged in Cork about reducing the administrative burden for farmers while increasing flexibility and subsidiarity for the member states and regions. And of course we're looking at how we can get more public goods on the environment, climate change and sustainability agenda, where we can get our farmers to do more for these areas. And of course we have to incentivise our farmers and pay them for doing this work for us on behalf of society.
Absolutely, and many of those comments were brought up today. Just in regards to consultation on the Common Agricultural Policy, it's commencing in February, and obviously it's a topic that's receiving a lot of focus here at Green Week. In light of Brexit and environmental changes, is this the most important in the history of CAP?
Well, this is a huge issue now. Brexit, of course, has put the cat amongst the pigeons, as it were, in terms of financial resources for the future of the CAP, and also, the fact that the UK are leaving. It means a big member state is going out of the European Union, and all of that entails in terms of a big economy for trade. And of course, Ireland, as you know, is very dependent on the UK for agriculture. 40% of our trade are with the UK. So it forces all governments to look at their economic and agricultural policies. It forces the Irish government, of course, to have a very detailed look because of our dependence on the UK and, of course, the North-South relationship. So, in the context of agriculture, we will be working this year intensively with all member states through the negotiations to see how we can get satisfactory landing ground for the policies that are in the treaties of the European Union, but to do so mindful of the fact that the island of Ireland has a very serious problem.
Another skim milk powder tender sale, and again nothing sold. How long can you hold out not selling the product out of intervention?
Well, we have to get a good price for it. It's like anything else when you put something up for tender or auction. You have to be satisfied with the price. We are not satisfied with the price at this stage, but I wouldn't panic. Certainly we have plans to ensure that whatever stocks we have in intervention or in storage, they will not be released in such a way that will damage the price recovery that we see in the dairy market at the moment. So our farmers can be assured that we will manage the market well, even though we have this overhang in the marketplace at the moment in storage.
Commissioner, at home, pressure has grown further on the government to provide a crisis fund for tillage after Fianna Fáil's motion. Can the EU help?
Well, you'll have to ask the Minister for Agriculture, because he has the resources and he, I'm sure, has listened to the debate very carefully. And I know that he's very mindful of the difficulties of the tillage sector, and I expect that he's working on some proposals at the moment to try and deal with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Then on Monday, the Council of the EU Agriculture Ministers met in Brussels. The Irish Farmers Journal market specialist Phil O'Neill asked Agriculture Minister Michael Creed about the main item on the agenda, trade negotiations.
The Commissioner was giving an update on trade matters and I suppose reflecting on the current global environment for that. And I suppose it doesn't come as any surprise that, TTIP is certainly something that progress is stalled or parked on for the moment. It's not expected that there will be a lot of traction on that in the foreseeable future. Just by way of preface, like our position as an agricultural island economy is inextricably linked with trade agreements. In principle, we're supportive. Obviously, it's not trade at any cost. It has to be the right trade deal for us, and we accept it in any trade negotiations as an element of give and take. But one of the things, obviously, in that element of give and take that informs a lot of our consideration is the cumulative impact report that the Commission did on what is the consequence for our agricultural industry of all of the trade deals that we have concluded to date in terms of the give and take, the balance, how much we should concede. And I think in particular that's particularly relevant in the context of Mercosur, which might raise its head again. It hasn't gone away, the kind of phrase from previous sort of parallel issue. So that's important to us. The Commission also kind of gave an indication, which is interesting in the context of Foodwise 2025, that perhaps because of TTIP being stalled, that the orientation is moving towards Southeast Asia for trade agreements. So things like Singapore, Japan are important. New Zealand, Australia.
How is Japan? Is that coming anywhere closer to
making
a
progress?
Conclusion?
Making progress. We would be hopeful that is probably one of the ones that will get over the line earliest.
Right.
And we would see obviously significant upside in that.
I gather that as well New Zealand was discussed earlier, the prospect of the trade discussions opening there. And I understand the polls have some concern about New Zealand milk access to the European Union. What's Ireland's position there?
Well, if you look at agriculture in New Zealand of recent vintage, there's been a very, I think I was reading a statistic, I may be incorrect, but there's been nearly a 30% drop in their sheep numbers in recent years. That's significant. And because of pollution associated issues with management of dairy herds, there's equally, not the continuing escalating
expansion.
Growth. So if we have managed it to this position in terms of trade, we see it not as a huge threat, but we will obviously need to see the detail.
Would Ireland be more relaxed then than Poland about New Zealand milk coming into Europe?
We need to be vigilant on all these issues, and certainly relaxed isn't something that I would associate with any trade deal, and certainly with an economy that's very similar to ours in terms of agricultural base, exporting orientated. No, not relaxed. Vigilant and bearing in mind the aforementioned cumulative impact statement. New Zealand already enjoys access to the European Union in the area of sheep meat, but something we will remain vigilant on.
Well, put it another way, do you think the polls are a little bit overreacting too quick then?
Yeah, I'm not particularly sure where they're coming from
Right.
on it. The Polish minister did make an intervention, but I'm not sure of the level of foothold that the New Zealanders have in the Polish market that gives rise
Gives
to
them
that.
concern.
Yeah.
The other one that's closer to home, I suppose, and will have most dramatic impact on Ireland of all the EU member states is Brexit. Did you give it an airing in the Council today at all?
Not specifically in the context of discussions we've had today, but I did actually over the weekend have a second bilateral meeting with Andrea Leadsom on Brexit related matters. In truth, our situation as an agricultural economy with the north-south dimension also, our ask is quite close to what the UK's ask is. And we're unapologetic for that. We're not doing that asking for similar things as in friction, free trade, to use Prime Minister May's words. We want an outcome that's as close as possible to the status quo, because that's our national interest. We put 43% of our agri-food exports into the UK market. We're a small country in Europe, a committed European country, remaining in the European Union. And we expect our voice to be listened to in the context of the ask we're making, and we have a sound rationale for that ask in terms of the current level of business that we're doing with the UK.
Minister Creed, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Last Thursday, the Dáil adopted a motion calling on the government to establish a crisis fund for tillage farmers hit by last year's bad harvest. Phelim asked Minister Creed how he would respond.
Yeah, what I'm committed to doing is convening the Tillage Forum as quickly as possible, and what my counter motion, which I acknowledge was defeated, clearly stated that we were reconvening the Tillage Forum with a view to discussing issues which had been previously raised at the Tillage Forum, which hadn't been progressed to date. And obviously one of those is the possibility of a compensation package. It is, I think, worth pointing out that in the context of the previous meeting on the 5th of October of the Tillage Forum, they raised knowledge transfer, they raised tillage TAMs, and they raised access to low interest capital. We've delivered 3 of the 4 asks. So I'm not ignoring the tillage sector. I do accept it has a challenged future, and in fact one of the points which I did make in the context of an intervention on a markets report delivered by the Commission was that when we're not in a position to guarantee prices, whether it's on tillage or on dairy or on beef or on sheep, the one thing which we can do is address input costs, because at the end of the day, to guarantee an income you must have a margin. And the point I was making, which is relevant to the tillage side, is that one of the areas where costs are higher than they should be in terms of inputs is on fertiliser costs. And I was invoking my colleagues around the council table to take up this issue again. It's not one that's specifically within the gift of the Agricultural Commissioner. It's a trade issue, and we've raised it before. But it is, depending on your location, probably adding anything from 30 to 50 euros a tonne onto the cost of fertiliser for farmers, and that's a significant input cost.
But you will be taking on board the vote in the Dáil last week, and you will be responding to that directly.
Yeah, and I, as I said, the Tillage Forum will reconvene. I'm open to discussing that issue of a fund. I mean, what was sought in the motion that was carried was a commitment to immediately establish a fund without in any way establishing who's entitled, how you might ring fence it to a cohort who were worst affected by the storm damage around harvest time. I mean, for example, there's over 1,000 growers in Cork. The IFA report would tell us there's only 100 who are interested in compensation. Now, we need to explore how we can ring fence a proposal that delivers whatever scarce resources we can put our hands on to those who suffered most.
Meanwhile, I asked other members of the ruling coalition what they thought should happen next. First, Fine Gael Kildare South TD Martin Hayden, who is also Fine Gael's parliamentary chairperson.
Look, Ministers Creed and Doyle set out a roadmap as to further engagement with the tillage sector through the forum and the different measures that are there in place. And I think the debate last week, a little bit populist maybe from the opposition, you could definitely say, but if you look at the detail of what was discussed and of the different measures in place that I highlighted in my contribution as well as that are in place for the tillage sector, there's absolute recognition from government that this is a difficult time, not just for the guys in the west and in certain areas that have had difficult weather conditions, but I know myself as a mixed farmer, mixed enterprise farmer.
From a tillage
absolutely. I have a tillage part of my enterprise is tillage as well. I know how difficult the last 3 or 4 years has been from a price perspective, so I think tillage has an absolutely crucial role to play, and government believes this as well, not just as to be providing product for a growing dairy and beef sector, but in terms of climate change. We look at what the new CAP is looking for from us. Tillage is a key role to play in that, and we very much recognise that. Whether there's a couple of million given in a fund in the coming months or not, the tillage farmers, that's ultimately a decision for the minister to best use the resources available.
Do you support a fund? Can you go back to your tillage constituents in your area, when that they can turn out 4.5 million? Is this something that you support?
Look, I can see the argument for it, and particularly those in geographical areas that have really suffered, and we need to keep tillage farmers in those areas. But the minister has a responsibility to best manage the money available to his resources, and any money he gives in one fund, he'll be taken off another area, or it'll have to come from somewhere. He doesn't have an infinite pot, and he has to best manage his resources there, and he has to weigh up all the options as to how best he can use the money he has available to support all tillage farmers in the country and to support the tillage sector. And Minister Creed and Doyle have a full angle on that, and I fully back them in the ongoing work in that sector.
Great.
Finally, let's hear from Minister for Communications and Independent TD Dennis Naughton.
There's pressure on government anyway to try and do something in relation to the tillage sector, and it's something that Minister Creed and myself have spoken about on a number of occasions. And I think there is maybe the opportunity that my own department and Minister Creed's department working together can put a renewed focus on the whole tillage industry in this country, and we need to try and do that. I'm in the process now of finalising the renewable heat incentive scheme. There may be opportunities for tillage farmers now to get into that particular area to have a sustainable long-term crop there. There is the short-term issue in relation to financial supports at the moment, and that's something that I'm sure Minister Creed will be coming back to Cabinet on.
Are you supportive of a $4.5 million package?
Well, look, I don't know what the issue is in relation to the resources within Minister Creed's department, as you know, because of the recent announcements. Monies are tight across government departments, so we just have to wait and see.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Last Friday, the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, or ICSA, staged a protest over low lamb prices outside Irish Country Meats factory in Navan, County Meath. Matthew Halpin was there for the Irish Farmers Journal, and he asked the ICSA's sheep chairman, John Brooks, why the farmers were protesting.
Matthew, this is the start of a campaign. ICSA Sheep Committee, part of the Sheep Committee from this area, are here today to protest outside of Irish Country Meats because of the very poor lamb prices that currently exist and the specs, the reduction of the weight limits. Sheep farmers are losing money today. They're losing money on the lamb that they're supplying. We see a deliberate effort from meat plants to cap sheep prices at $4.70 and at insult to injury to go reduce the weight limits that would normally be going up to 24 kilos at this time of year. And if you compare lamb prices this time last year and the year before, they were heading for $5.50. Today they're at $4.70. So effectively sheep farmers are down €20 a head, puts them into a loss-making situation. Also, it's only last summer the Meat Industry Ireland produced a statement requiring an extra, saying there was huge potential for lamb growth and there was huge markets to be exploited, and they were looking for 1 million extra sheep. We see now in the last couple of weeks, with a small hike in supply because of the fine weather we had in October, November and December, lambs are maybe a couple of kilos heavier than normal. We see a small hike in supply, and what the meat plants do, only reduce price and reduce weight limits. So instead of exploiting markets, the only ones being exploited are sheep producers.
John, is there room in the current market for an increase in sheep and lamb prices?
Absolutely. All the indicators are that the trade should be stronger this spring than any other spring, simply because there is no New Zealand lamb, or very little New Zealand lamb on the British market. So there's roughly the same amount of lamb available this year as last year or the year before across Europe. And when you take into account that there's no New Zealand lamb in the UK market, there's all the indicators pass that lamb prices should be even stronger this year than any other year. But as I said to you, we see this as a deliberate attempt, and the knock-on effect from this is that if the store producer or the store man who buys store lamb and fattens them and sells them during the spring, if he's losing money, he won't be as strong, or she won't be as strong in the marketplace next June or July when lamb production is at its peak, and it has a knock-on effect of reducing lamb price at that time of the year again.
John, is this a case of, we'll say, factories holding down lamb prices in order to buy in lamb from the north at higher prices?
I would say I can't confirm that, but the rumour has it, which is even worse, that currently some meat plants are importing lamb from Scotland, direct from Scotland, and slaughtering them here. Now, Matthew, that's like throwing apples into an orchard. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever when a market currently is oversupplied with lamb that you could turn around and bring lamb in from Scotland. That's a deliberate attempt to depress the price further.
John, can I ask, what is your current stance on the sheep clipping prices that are currently being imposed by factories?
Yeah, well, ICSA are totally against any extra levies. We're totally against levies anyway. If clipping charges, or if clipping is necessary, is as a part of the butchering technique, we see this as that the factory should absorb this cost themselves, and if so be it, if they have to take a clip off each lamb that comes in, or only off the dirty lambs, whatever. If there's an issue with dirty lamb, I myself go around to a lot of meat plants that kill sheep, and a lot of meat plants. Very rarely have I ever come across dirty lambs, or the lambs that we are led to believe that need clipping. If there's an issue with dirty lamb coming into a meat plant, it should be an issue between the meat plant and the supplier that's involved. But the 99% of farmers that produce clean lamb and bring in clean lamb, they are now being penalised across the board by a clipping charge. And we see this as another means of extracting another levy and extracting more money out of sheep farmers' pockets.
John, is there future plans for the ICSA Sheep Committee to protest outside more lamb factories in the coming weeks and months?
Absolutely. This is only, we're firing a shot across the bow, and we're letting the meat industry know, or the meat plants know, that we're not taking this standing. We're going to up the ante. We have a number of decisions made as regards what we're going to do in the coming weeks. If there's no movement in price or no movement in the weight specs, we'll be up in the ante, and it won't be as simple as just standing outside a meat plant. That's all I say at the moment on that.
John Buck, thanks very much indeed for talking to the Farmers Journal.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
We've heard much from politicians and farm representatives about Brexit, but what do regular farmers say? Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Thomas Hubert met Sean O'Leonard, a dairy farmer in Macroom, County Cork, who has given it a lot of thought.
Very often in any discussion, you have to understand where those that are giving you the information are coming from. And the primacy at this point is that the information is either coming from our own government or from Brussels. Therefore, their intent is to protect themselves rather than anyone at the extremities. I would think a classic mistake could be made here, and what it is that our innate connection to the British landmass, then if you take the actual ability that we have to actually in commerce with them, right, it is to our benefit, very much so, that Great Britain gets a good deal out of Europe, not a bad deal out of Europe. If she gets a bad deal, we will most certainly get a worse deal out of Europe. Now, I would take it then on that basis that our government should actually stand back ever so slightly and take their European hands out of their pockets. Some people are very well paid, and I have no denying the fact that they've gained immensely out of Europe, and so have all of us. But nothing was ever made to last in its present format, ever. It has to change, and sometimes it has to go through a catastrophic change to end up with the goal that you originally wanted. You go back to the early 70s when the common market was formed. It was a common market. What we have now at the moment is a social, common market, financial, and very slowly over the intervening years it has reached a point where it actually is unanswerable to anyone but the centre. So the centre dictates to the periphery, and the periphery then has to accept. A classic case is Lisbon 1, Lisbon 2. Now, maybe at this stage we should revert back, sit down with our neighbours, who are the British, and say, OK, if you're going, what can we gain out of this? Maybe not necessarily go jointly to Brussels, because you cannot go jointly because the rules don't allow it, but have an influence and be viewed in London as being friends rather than being treating our neighbours as outcasts. We will gain them.
How do you think farmers are represented through all this? Is there anyone defending farmers' interests, or how should that be done so that the actual farmer who is at the moment dependent on this British market can get a decent deal at the other end of it?
I have a distinct problem with this, is that when you actually circularise it down to a one entity question, right, so you can never get a good answer. And you can't, right? We are a nation of peoples, not individuals. We're not secularly going for farmers and going for someone else. We must look at the whole rather than the individual. And if one individual grouping loses because of the other one, I said, well, so be it, but if it's in the betterment for the country as a whole. And then betterment for the country as a whole, now we need to look at that maybe in a broader sense. So from a farmer viewpoint, once I take everybody into account, I would think, right, that the effect it'll have in farming could be catastrophic. Yes, there is no question about that. But we can actually, I think, exasperate that rather than not if we don't actually take a clinical view on it. And the clinical view is, do we have someone that can actually do our fighting for us? We have a commissioner outside there who is sold to Brussels. He is a Eurocrat. Therefore, he is not going to be helping us necessarily as individuals. His remit doesn't cover that. He's no good to us. We can take previous Taoiseach, take John Bruton for instance, another Eurocrat, right? Again, his hands are in the Euro machine. He doesn't serve us well. The government in itself, this is strange, the more you go into this, right, so the more you go into it, right, you'll see is that we are actually tied to the Euro machine. Now, is there someone We lost someone lately, TJ Whittaker. Look at the vision that guy had. It was not based on the basis of one person winning everything. It was on the basis that the whole comes out on top. Now, the whole doesn't have to be a nationalist view of 26 counties. It doesn't have to be 32 counties. It doesn't have to be 27 states. But it has to be for the betterment of all, not individuals on their own. If we take that guy's dream, his passion, for what he actually started off, right, continue it, right, on the basis that this guy didn't try to make money out of it. He tried to get it right. And for the most part, that I know of the man, he got it right.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Pedigree Breeder magazine, published by the Irish Farmers Journal, is available in the shops now. Our Pedigree editor Shane Murphy takes Amy Fitzgibbon through the hot topics in the industry at the moment and their coverage in the magazine.
So I suppose primarily focused at the dairy, beef and sheep pedigree breeders of the country, but it's not stopping there really. I suppose the commercial breeder for each of these sectors have a lot to learn out of it as well. Most commercial breeders, I suppose, don't realise the importance the pedigree breeder actually has in their enterprises. It stands as a prime source for new genetics coming in, and I suppose all the articles we got through incorporates the commercial breeders into that too.
I suppose it is, yeah, it's very important for just generally for commercial.
Yeah, just to keep up to date really. I suppose with all the goings on in the pedigree sector that can be adapted to their herd. I suppose the likes of the stars now, the pedigree industry would have been well used to well in advance of the commercial men, whereas the BGP is making all the commercial people think about that now.
Yeah.
So definitely there's definitely something to be learned for everyone.
Okay, and what aspects of the industry then does it look at?
It's quite broad. There's 148 pages in the new magazine, so it's one of the biggest magazines we've released all year. Okay. For the aspects of it, we got cost involved to rear a pedigree bull. I suppose for the pedigree reader, that's important to know how much of a margin he needs to charge above that to make a profit. It also gives a good idea for the commercial man going in, like what do I need to pay for a bull, like what's it going to cost the pedigree breeder, and what do I have to pay above that. For feeding the show animal throughout the year, the showing industry is a massive part of the sector, and just what's actually involved, what's the right ingredients to be feeding to get that final bloom, I suppose, on the animals for show day.
Yeah.
And other topics such as embryo transfer, what's involved in the steps to that, how to look after the cow properly, the cost involved in it, and new bulls that are coming onto the scene in 2017. We've selected 7 of the upcoming ones that we think could be the next big stars, so they're ones to look out for as well. We also look in depth at the star systems for both the sheep and beef. We've got Pat Donlan talking from ICBF on why the stars actually change as the bull progresses and how this is going to increase the reliability with the genomics going forward. And the same, we got Nora McHugh from Tagus talking about the sheep side and new advances they're making on that side. Data bank also, so that's 5 pages comprehensive figures that you need to know for your sector. That covers dairy, beef and sheep, how many calves are born in the country by each breed, which are the upcoming breeds, which breed are going through a slump, all information like that, embryo transfers, AI calves, everything you need to know really. And finally we got a comprehensive review of the entire year, covering all shows and sales across all breeds, sheep, beef and dairy, as well as a 26-page UK focus, and that's probably the biggest one of this edition.
Okay, that sounds great. And obviously we're a little bit off the shows at this stage, but it is good to be thinking about them at this stage, isn't it?
Definitely. I suppose the shows, that's what decides what the pedigree breeder is going to use as their sires for the following year. If a bull had done well this year, it's more likely going to be used heavily in the autumn, and they're the calves that will be on the show this year then.
Okay, and so the special focus you mentioned in this edition on the UK, so what's looked at in this section for farmers?
So yeah, I suppose the UK we have to look at all the time in detail. They're our biggest export markets. Yeah. All of our top end bulls tend to go there, even throughout the autumn sales, our biggest sales. I think it was 5 out of 7 top priced bulls across the breeds, that's beef breeds now, would have went to the UK market, and they would have ranged up as far as was 11.3 for Limousine, there was 14,000 for Charlie.
Okay.
All the top
important market then.
Seriously important. So not only is it important to breed for that market, a lot of our genetics are also coming from that market. So in the 26th page UK Focus, we got a full review of their top in sales, their top in shows, the bulls they're constantly producing it over there. And we also look in detail at 3 of the bigger herds who've supplied a lot of genetics to Ireland's national herd over the last 20-30 years, I suppose.
Wow, it sounds really comprehensive.
Yeah.
So we know the magazine came out last Friday, but where exactly can people buy it?
So all good newsagents should have it on the shelves by now. It's also available online, www.farmersjournal.ie/store.
Okay, well that sounds like a really great magazine with loads of really important content for pedigree breeders and commercial breeders alike. So thank you very much, Shane.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Young Farmers Club of Ulster held its annual agriculture conference in Cookstown, County Tyrone last Saturday. The Irish Farmers Journal's Northern Ireland correspondent Peter McCann was there, and he asked the YFCU's president Roberta Simmons how the organisation has evolved recently.
Yeah, well, during Barrel World Show there last year, we picked 3,000 members, and the YFCU is all about a number of different things. First of all, there's the educational side of things, where we have a range of different competitions and activities, and we also have travel opportunities where members can travel through various places throughout the world, long-term, short-term exchanges, and indeed what's known as the European Rally within the European countries. We have the agricultural side of activities and events and competitions within our stock judging, our silage assessment, our soil assessment, the tractor driving competitions. So there's just a complete range of things.
As far as the Young Farmers goes, he's having a consultation on Brexit, and how far he's on with that, or what is your idea of that? And I suppose in the past, and things like cap reform, you would have sided with the Ulster Farmers Union, but in this particular issue, obviously, important issue, you're going out on your own with it.
Well, yeah, we had our information night in Brexit where we had various speakers come along from within the industry, and then we had our what was known as our roundtable discussion evening, where our own members were allowed to come on the night and sit round and discuss what they would like to see in the implementation of policy going forward, from rural young dwellers' point of view. So I suppose, yes, we do. There's times where we agree with the Farmers Union, and there's times where we don't agree with their consultations as well, because we have to bring the young farmers and the young rural dwellers' point of view to the fore as well. So we're working at the minute on putting a document together, which we would hope to then in due course take to government, and hopefully even to Westminster then in due course. I suppose it's all about looking after firstly rural young dwellers and rural youth, and making their point of view heard as well, because everyone keeps saying it's a clean slate, so we feel it's the right opportunity for us to get our say in there as well if it is a clean slate.
This is the second year of this conference. You're taking a fairly technical look at farming systems, and between that and your consultation on Brexit, and also the land mobility service that you're working on, is the Young Farmers maybe becoming more of a lobby organisation than a technically minded thing, as it was maybe in the past, but more of a social thing?
No, well, it's not really a lobby organisation either. Like, we are not, as a non-political organisation, but we do feel it's very important to get the point, from young farmers and rural youth very much to the fore. And I mean, agriculture is an essential industry, which needs top quality people with drive, and I suppose it's the matter of bringing those young people in, giving them the opportunity, and the Land Mobility Initiative will give them that opportunity to get their foot onto the ladder and to move forward, and hopefully agriculture will be there for future generations.
Roberta, thanks very much for your time.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, did you know that you could claim tax back on a range of expenses and credits for up to 4 years? The paperwork may not be appealing, but Irish Country Living consumer editor Ciara Leahy told Mary Phelan that it could be well worth your while.
Well, Mary, tax and claim back. Look, first of all, before we get into this and before people turn off thinking, oh God, I don't want to hear about tax and claiming back. Look, you're not alone. Nobody enjoys the paperwork. Not all of us have our receipts stored neatly from last year. If you're anything like me, you're going to be searching through drawers and stuff like that. But the thing is, it's an hour or two work, but it actually could result in a good windfall of money for you. So it's really worth doing. So I suppose one of the first things that you should be looking at is your personal tax credits. Now, if you're a self-employed employed farmer, you'll be working with your accountant submitting your own annual tax returns. But I suppose if there's anybody in the family that's a PAYE worker, now is the time you're going to have to do a bit of work yourself on this. But it's actually pretty straightforward. Okay, the first thing you need to do is get your P60 from your employer, and most companies are going to issue them by the end of January. Then you just log on to the Revenue's PAYE Anytime service on revenue.ie and you set up an account. You request a balancing statement called a P21, which you'll get in about 4 or 5 days, and then this will allow you to see if you've overpaid tax last year, and to submit your bank account details for a refund. So it's really, really not that complicated, and you can claim back for the last 4 years. So, I mean, this could result in a bit of a windfall if you haven't done it before. The only thing you need to be aware of, though, is if you have overpaid tax, you'll get it back. But if you've underpaid your taxes, you will owe that to the revenue. So, it's worth noting that. But a lot of people do find that they've overpaid tax and are able to claim that tax back.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, a lot of people know that they can claim for health or medical expenses, but they might not be aware about just how much is actually covered. Yeah, see, I think that a lot of people might not bother, unless you've got kind of a serious health issue that you're forking out a lot of money for, then people might be like, look, what's it really going to be worth it to me? But, I mean, it's not just about claiming back the odd GP visit or dental appointment. There's actually a plethora of expenses that are covered under this. So things like hearing aids, physiotherapy, an ambulance trip, x-rays, eye surgery, any fertility or maternity service, they're all included in this. You can even claim back for prescription medicines. So it really is worth doing because it's claimed at the standard rate of 20%. So if you spent €1,000 on your medical expenses in 2016, you're going to receive back €200. If you spend €500, you're going to get €100. So, it is worth looking at that. And also to be aware that you can claim for you, your spouse, or any person you can claim tax allowances for, like children. So if they had doctor visits last year, that can all be claimed for by filling out a Med 1 form on revenue.ie. Now, Ciara, I was interested to know you can actually claim back if you pay for health insurance.
Yeah, so look, basically all the medical expenses we've just detailed, if your health insurance company covered the cost of them, you can't claim the tax back on that, obviously. But you can actually claim back on your health insurance policy, and most people don't know that. Now, if you pay for your health insurance policy yourself out of your own pocket, this tax relief has already been deducted for you, so it doesn't really apply. But if you're employed in a company that pays some of your health insurance premium as a benefit in kind, then you should notify your local revenue office and you'll receive tax relief in the form of tax credits. So that's worth noting. But also, if you do have a health insurance policy, this isn't a tax claim back, but you should really look at, claiming back for your expenses over the course of last year. Over 70% of people renew their policy in the first 3 months of the year, and most health insurance companies will require you to submit your receipts within 3 months of the last year ending. So, for example, if you renewed your health insurance on January 1, you'll need to get your receipts in by the end of March 2016. And look, as I said, it's hard to find all those receipts, but contact your GP. They might just give you a statement of all your trips last year. Some of them do that free of charge, so it's worth just making a phone call.
And I think there you meant the receipts need to be in by March 2017, not 2016. Am I
right?
Apologies. Yeah, just to clarify that, so people can still get them in for last year.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Ciara, you have a good little tip when it comes to college tuition fees.
Okay, so college fees can be a massive impact on the annual outgoings of the family budget, especially if you have a few children studying. And there are caps on the whole what you can claim back for. So basically, if you are claiming for a full-time student, there's no tax relief on the first €3,000 of your tuition fees from 2015 onwards, and the same is true of part-time students. The cap on that is $1,500, but you can't claim tax relief on the rest. But interestingly, if you have more than one child going to college, you'll have the cap on the first $3,000 for the first child. But any second or any subsequent students after that, you can claim full tax relief. But there's no specification that has to be your own child, Mary. So and in fact, the people don't even have to be related. So we've actually found that some families are paying the student contribution for 2 students, i.e. their own child and maybe a niece or nephew, and then the following year the other family will pay, and that way both families are availing of the tax relief just in different years.
Oh.
It's a little bit around the system, but we made a few calls and it is legal.
Oh.
So if you have, a niece, 2 cousins going to college and you've got a relationship, then it's worth it looking into that.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Now finally, Ciara, this is just a small selection of what you can claim back for. What else could readers possibly be eligible for claiming back on?
Yeah, Mary, I suppose in this week's Irish Country Living we've kind of done a little overview on the ones that we've mentioned. If we were to write about everything you claim tax back for, we could be taking over all of Irish Country Living for this week. But look, you can also claim back on one parent family credits, widowed parent credits, home carers credits. You have dependent relative credits, relief for long-term unemployed people, loan interest relief, pension contributions, investment relief, nursing home fees. The list is quite endless and can be very specific based on your own, what's going on in your own life. So it really is worth logging on to the Revenue or Citizens Information to get an overview of absolutely everything.
And Ciara, you have one top tip here.
Once you've gotten all the receipts together, make sure to keep them in a safe place, because while the claims are done online, you may actually be selected randomly for review by the Revenue. So when you've gone to all those efforts of getting the receipts, put them in an envelope, keep them together and don't throw them out.
Okay, brilliant. Ciara, thanks a million. There's some great advice there.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.